We're going to start tonight's program. Thank you all for coming. I think it's a great turnout tonight. Exciting way to begin the speaker series for 2011, 12, 13. Let's kind of lose track these days. I'll try and project and see if that just works all right, and if not, I'll use the microphone. Can people hear me okay without the microphone? Do you still catch me? All right, I will use the microphone. This is why I wasn't a theater student. My name is Ben Martin, and I'm the director of alumni clubs and communities, as we call them, alumni groups, really, for the USC Alumni Association. So a job I've had, or a permutation of that job, for the last couple of years now. It's a great job to have. It means I get to work with groups like this and see events like this all around the country and now world, too. We're very much focused on our global presence, too. So tonight, we've got a great program ahead of us, but before we get into the program, I wanted to recognize a few people who are here with us in the audience and who are very involved in tonight's program as well. First, I want to recognize in the back Dick DeBeckus and his wife Bryn. Dick's a trustee of the university and was president of the Alumni Association, I guess, 2 years ago now. So thank you for joining us tonight, both of you. And to my left, she'll speak in a few minutes, but Carla Kraft, who is currently president of the Alumni Club of Newport-Irvine. And she's actually founder of this series as well, so we owe her a debt for beginning this program for us. She's also an Annenberg graduate herself, but she was not biased at all in tonight. That was actually me, although I'm actually an Annenberg graduate as well, so maybe there's a little bit of bias tonight. And probably most importantly, Carla is a new mother as well, so congratulations, Carla. And over to my left in the audience is Heather Martin, no relation. There's lots of possible biases tonight, I guess. But Heather is now chair for the club speaker series, and so has put a lot of work into making sure that these 4 events go off very well. So thank you, Heather. And I've lost track of where she is, but in the back, Amy Jo Luna, who's Director of Alumni Relations for Annenberg. So make sure that Annenberg alumni are well taken care of throughout the country and around the world. And we also owe her a debt of gratitude for the mugs, which went very, very quickly tonight. So thank you for those. And finally, I want to make sure to introduce Harmony Frederick, who is a new member of our staff at the Alumni Association. So many of you are, thank you. Many of you are probably used to seeing Erin Williams' face here, and she's still on staff and has a different role with us right now. Still working with San Diego, so those of you who go to programs down there might see her. But Harmony has joined us recently from the Rossier School of Education, and she's a pleasure to work with. So I hope you all will enjoy getting to know her and be nice. So thank you, Harmony. Tonight we're really part of an exciting new era and an era of change at the university, and I think everybody is aware of this by this point. If you've been up on campus lately, you've probably seen how much of a physical change there really has been with the new campus center open and our new home, the Alumni Center, is part of that on the 3rd floor. If you haven't had a chance to yet, I really encourage you to come up and see it because it's a beautiful facility. But of course, most importantly, we have a new president of the university, President C.L. Max Nikias. Some of you may have had a chance to go to the reception that he had here in Orange County as a chance for you to hear some of his thoughts and to meet him just within the last week or so. And tonight, although we still have a full house here, our competition is President Nikias is having a reception up in Los Angeles on the west side, to which last I heard about 700 people had RSVP'd to attend. So it wasn't doing too badly, and that's one of 2 in Los Angeles. The next one, I believe, is on February 8th. So it's an exciting time. Our job at the Alumni Association, as we change with the times, is really to reflect some of these changes and to make sure that you're tied into the university and tied into each other as well. So I used to say, as part of my introductory remarks, that we're not just about football anymore. But I think after the last couple of years, you're well aware of that. And this audience in particular, for better or for worse, this audience in particular is well aware that we're also very much about academic programming and cultural programming, community service, career events, and those types of things as well, which I'm very proud of myself. So tonight, I'm very interested to hear what should be some fascinating remarks from the director of the Norman Lear Center. I've had the chance to hear one of his colleagues talk about the impact of intellectual property protection in the fashion industry and how that might compare and what that might say for us as we look at new media and what intellectual property protections we might have there, something you might not necessarily think about in your day-to-day life. So it's an interesting website to peruse. There's always a lot of new and fascinating information on it, and tonight you'll get a chance to hear about that firsthand. So for that introduction, I want to turn it over to Carla, and thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thanks, Ben, and from our club, thanks to Ben and Harmony and the Alumni Association, they've given us a lot of support in this series, which is now in its 13th year, and we are excited to kick off the 13th year of the series tonight with Martin Kaplan of the Norman Lear Center. Before I tell you a little bit about Marty Kaplan, while I have your attention, I want to plug our next event. The speaker series is 4 speakers, 1 each on the last Wednesday of the month in January, February, March, and April. There are informational flyers about the entire series on this table right up here. They're the black flyers at the front of the table. Our next event will be February 23rd, and it's a healthcare panel. It's 4 speakers. The deans of the pharmacy school and the policy planning and development school will be here, along with professors from both of those schools, to talk about healthcare in America. But tonight, we are focused on a different topic, and we have with us Professor Martin Kaplan. He holds the Norman Lear Chair in Entertainment, Media, and Society at USC's Annenberg School and is the founding director of the Norman Lear Center, whose mission is to study and shape the impact of media and entertainment on society. The Norman Lear Center was founded 11 years ago, not surprisingly, by Norman Lear. If you're not in entertainment, you may not be familiar with his name, but you are undoubtedly familiar with Norman Lear's work. He created sitcoms such as The Jeffersons, All in the Family, and Maude, and he also was active in political life. He created, among other things, the watchdog organization People for the American Way. The combination of his entertainment and civic interests made him concerned about the multitude of ways, good and bad, that media and entertainment impact and influence society. Tonight's speaker, Marty Kaplan, has a similar background to Norman Lear and deeply shares Mr. Lear's concerns and thoughts about media and its impact. The genesis of the Norman Lear Center, in fact, is the long-standing friendship and the mutual interests of Norman Lear and Marty Kaplan. So before I tell you a little bit about the center and what Marty Kaplan is doing there, I have to spend a couple of minutes on his educational background because it's too good to skip. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard in molecular biology. He was named a Marshall Scholar and went on to study at Cambridge, obtaining a first in English at Cambridge. He then went to Stanford, where he received his PhD in modern thought and literature and served as a Danforth Fellow. Once he had conquered the educational sphere, he moved into the private sector and moved first into politics. He's done a number of things in the political sphere. Most notably, he was the chief of staff for Vice President Walter Mondale. He headed up, or was the deputy chair of Walter Mondale's presidential campaign, and he was an op-ed editor at the Washington Star. He then moved on to entertainment, where for 12 years he was the vice president at Walt Disney. He was both on the film production side and then produced and was a producer and screenwriter, including on an Eddie Murphy film, The Distinguished Gentleman. He then moved on to USC. As a true Renaissance man, he decided he'd conquered a couple of fields and was ready for the next one. And for 10 years, he was the associate dean of the Annenberg School and taught undergraduate and graduate courses at Annenberg. Now, as the head of the Norman Lear Center, he leads scholars who explore the social, political, economic, and cultural impact of media and entertainment. They address complex questions like, does television make us more ignorant? And is American culture America's real foreign policy? That might sound pretty theoretical and ivory tower-esque. It's actually not. To the contrary, the center's research and initiatives directly impact the content of the television that we watch, the news coverage that we see, and how we use internet and will use internet in the future. So tonight, Professor Kaplan is going to tell us about the cutting-edge research and development they are doing at the Norman Lear Center.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla, for reminding me of how much tuition we paid. Can you hear me? I've switched the mic on. Is it working? Great. I really appreciate your coming out tonight, and you look marvelous. So, I appreciate the invitation. We're going to talk together after a while, but I'm going to start out by putting some stuff out. So it'll be grist for a conversation. And I'm also going to push the right button here for, which one is it? To lower these lights? Oh, great, perfect. Already done. Excellent. All right. The most studied city in America is Muncie, Indiana. It was chosen in 1924. Okay, great. No napping, okay? I can see you. In 1924, a couple of sociologists wanted to find the quintessential American city. So they looked for population centers and geographic centers, and they chose Muncie, Indiana. And in their first study, which came out in 24, they called it, and subsequently, Middletown. So this is one of the map from the earliest study. They went back to Middletown in 1937, 1976, and 2004. And they studied everything about the people of Middletown. One of the things that they studied was what they did for fun, what kind of media they consumed. Of course, when they started, media did not include television. And at the 2004 study, the authors said that the amount of entertainment consumed in Middletown staggers the imagination. It is unprecedented in human history. No large population anywhere had ever spent so much of their time being entertained. So, in principle, Middletown was not different. So that observation, in some ways, applies to the U.S. broadly. So, how do we usually think about entertainment? If you are a Wall Street analyst, for example, you'll be talking about an economic sector with different industries within it. Or if you're just a consumer of entertainment, you'll talk about music and video games and sports, theater, publishing, television, gambling. Those are the industries that are included. The question is, what is it that they all have in common? It's funny, entertainment is something we all know what it is, but when you actually try to think about trying to define it, sometimes it might seem elusive. So what do all those things have in common? I think it would be tempting to talk about the things themselves, the TV, the singer, the team, the gambling apparatus, the iPod, and so on. But instead, think of entertainment not as about these things which provide entertainment, but think instead about the people being entertained. Entertainment is one of those rare terms that really is defined by the state it puts us in, rather than the thing that is doing it. So what do these people have in common? The clue, as usual, is in one of the dictionary definitions. This is the Oxford English Dictionary. And in 1612, the first appearance of the action of occupying attention agreeably. And I think that's the key, attention. Because what entertainment wants is to be paid attention to. And we want to pay attention to it. It is an agreeable experience. Doesn't mean that all entertainment is comedy. You can have your attention occupied agreeably by, something really sad or something really scary. But you like the feeling of having your attention being occupied. It's not only things like movies and television and music that occupy our attention that could be called entertainment. For example, the King Tut exhibit. Blockbuster museum shows are very common. Museums are in the business of attracting audiences. There's a Nike Town store. When you go shopping, it's often like going to a theme park. It's a complete entertaining world that you're going into. I don't think you'd find it a stretch to think of news as a branch of the entertainment business. What is news trying to do but grab and hold our attention? Politics, what are politicians up to? There is a way to think about virtually every domain of modern existence as being part of the ecology of entertainment. Now, I don't have to tell you that. Here is a local phenomenon, a park, which clearly, as its emblem, the Great Park, has this beautiful gondola meant to entertain. The question then arises, how much entertainment is there out there? The University of California at San Diego does a periodic study similar to the Middletown study, only this is modern and it's in the digital age and it's quite quantitative. And what they did was look at the information flows in a typical home. So this doesn't count what happens at work, doesn't count what happens as you travel between home and work or anywhere else, just looking at the flows in a home. And they're also not looking at stuff that's sitting there in storage, like the hard drive of a computer or your collection of music. They're only looking at the stuff that's flowing. You can see that circle up there. Only as a listener, a viewer, is receiving the information, data in motion. So they studied this. What they came up with was that for a typical American, a typical American spends 11.8 hours per person per day taking in information, and I would contend that most of that information is entertainment. Another way to think of that time is in words. Some of that entertainment is words. 100,000 words per person per day. Or you can think about it the way we do in the digital era in terms of bytes. And the amount of bytes we take in typically is 34 gigabytes per day per person, which is a phenomenal amount. If you look at another way to present it, you'll see that of all the different platforms, music, movies, games, and so on, the absolute dominant one in the back there against that wall is still television. The only platform that competes with it is computer games in terms of the number of bytes, because that's how computer games are delivered. 34 gigabytes per person per day is too much. We can't do it. I'm going to return to that theme. So what happens when your attention is the magnet, the target for all of this input? Well, we are physical creatures. We only have the apparatus that we have. And scientists believe that attention, which is a very well-studied phenomenon, basically there are two kinds of attention. There is what's called bottom-up attention. This is in our hard wiring. It's the autonomic part of our brains and nervous systems. We can't help paying attention to some things. I mean, think of evolution. Think of someone hunting, and there's a big growl. That gets your attention. We'll talk about other things that get attention. But all these things are, you don't have to think about it. It just happens. Your head gets jerked. That's bottom-up attention. Then there's top-down attention, sometimes called the executive function. This is the part of us that responds to our will, our decisions, our filtering, what we think is salient or relevant, what we want to focus on. So some things we decide to attend to, but other things we attend to whether we want to or not. And different parts of the brain deal with those two kinds of attention. The top-down attention, where we are using our will, scientists through imaging have discovered actually can be located in something called the anterior cingulate cortex, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and the thalamus. They do these experiments and watch people decide things, what to pay attention to, and that's what lights up. Bottom-up attention is controlled by what's called the limbic system. This is what bathes our brains in fluid. It's not the neurons and the synapses, it's the thing that they're all in. It's where all the hormones are, all the chemicals whooshing around our brain. So that bottom-up piece is everywhere consuming us. So what gets our bottom-up attention? Fear. I mentioned that growling animal. Sex. I dare you to have a picture with skin on it, especially a lot of skin, and not have your eyes drawn to it. You may not want to stay there, you may not like it, but there's something about it. Novelty. Do you ever wonder why in the supermarket every third product says on it in a huge lettering, new? It's because we can't help noticing something that claims to be new or that is new in our field of vision. So fear, sex, and novelty are among the most reliable tools for grabbing our bottom-up attention. But so are a couple of other things. Play. We are creatures who love to play. And so any opportunity that we're given to play grabs our attention, whether we want to or not. And then, to me, the most interesting is story. We love stories. If someone says once upon a time, it's hard not to want to know what comes next. So story is another way of grabbing and holding our attention. Once our attention is grabbed and held, we are, think about it, especially this bottom-up attention, we are in a kind of trance. We are enthralled. It's a kind of rapture. Think of yourself, deep into watching a movie, or being overcome by music, or listening to a story. You forget yourself. You forget time. That can be dangerous. And the first person who talked about the danger of that in the Western tradition is Plato. And you have to think about the context Plato lived in. The 5th century BCE Greece, people, Homeric bards, would wander around Greece and recite the Iliad and the Odyssey from memory. They had contests to do this. 10 to 20,000 people would show up at these performances, and there would be huge prizes for winning them. Those poets, Homer and the people who recited Homer, were the rock stars of Plato's time. They were what could attract huge, adoring crowds. So Plato worried about the influence that being enthralled by poetry could have on people. So in his book, The Republic, where he tries to design a utopia, an ideal kingdom, and the ideal education for the ideal leader of that kingdom, in Book 10, he famously says that there is one kind of person who can't be taught in school, in fact, has to be banished from the Republic. You cannot have these people in it. And it's the poets. Plato banished the poets because of how dangerous they are. He said, in Book 10, poets water and foster the emotions of sex and anger and all the appetites of our soul. It establishes them, those appetites, as our rulers when they ought to be ruled. If you grant admission to poetry, pleasure and pain will be lords of your city instead of law and reason. And in saying that, imagine he is saying that even if you have reason, you are brilliant, you've been trained in geometry and philosophy, when the poet casts you in a spell, the poet has access to an apparatus that you have which is independent of your reason. So even if you don't intend to be in the thrall of poetry, it doesn't matter. In a way, he was describing this bottoms-up limbic system, and in a clear way, he was one of the original censors in history, saying there's no way we can regulate this stuff, have to keep it out, too dangerous. Move forward a few centuries, similar theme. St. Augustine, in his Confessions, Lord, stop me from sinning, but not too soon. That was the theme of St. Augustine. He talks about the gladiators. That was what was going on contemporary with him, the Colosseum. If you've been watching Spartacus, there's a clip from that. St. Augustine tells a story which relates to the passage from Plato. He tells about a man that he knew named Alypius. And Alypius was dragged by his friends to the Colosseum. Didn't want to go. Alypius shut his eyes tightly, determined to have nothing to do with the atrocities. If only he could have closed his ears as well. For an incident in the fight drew a great roar from the crowd, and this thrilled him so deeply that he could not contain his curiosity. So he opened his eyes, and his soul was stabbed with a wound more deadly than any which the gladiator, whom he was so anxious to see, had received in his body. He fixed his eyes upon the scene and drank in all its frenzy, unaware of what he was doing. He reveled in the wickedness of the fighting and was drunk with the fascination of bloodshed. He watched and cheered and grew hot with excitement, and when he left the arena, he carried away with him a diseased mind, which would leave him no peace until he came back again, no longer simply with his friends who had first dragged him there, but at their head, leading new sheep to slaughter. So in the classical tradition, a very negative view of what rock stars, poets, entertainers did, because it could take a fine young mind, and despite what that young mind, that reason, wanted to do, could so corrupt that person that, in the case of this story, would come back and addicted to that pleasure. So that's bottom-up attention and its place in the Western tradition. How about top-down attention? I mentioned earlier that there was this 34 gigabytes. So how do we deal with, how does our top-down attention, our will, when we decide, how do we deal with that? Well, some people say that what we do is that we multitask, that we have learned, especially if you do a lot of it, to pay attention to lots and lots of things at the same time. Another view is that what we do is pay continuous partial attention to things. So not full, but we can kind of spread it all around like radar, scoping what's going on. Turns out that there's no scientific evidence for multitasking. We oscillate between things, even if it's very fast. And there's similarly, it's a great concept, but there's no evidence for continuous partial attention. Instead, what there is evidence for, and it's kind of tragic, is that attention is a zero-sum game. You only have so much of it. And if you pay it here, you can't pay it there. There is a wonderful sociologist named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi who wrote a book called Flow, which examines the, you know, the expression being in the zone, what an athlete or an artist is. He's the one who came up with that idea. And here he is talking about this dealing with 34 gigabytes and the fact that we have a zero-sum game. Now, I'm going to ask, is Chris still there? I'm just wanting to turn up the volume because that was kind of low. Were you able to hear it? Yes. All right, well, if you could, thank you so much. I don't know where the button is. What he said was, that's all you can take in. That's our bandwidth. So all that other stuff you can't deal with. And so your top-down function is trying to decide, and at the same time, the bottom-up function is being grabbed, making decisions for us, whether we want to or not. Well, a zero-sum game means scarcity. There's an economist named Herb Simon who described it this way. It's a fascinating way to put it. There's all this information. There's 34 gigabytes per person per day. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention and a need to allocate that attention efficiently. So we live in an attention economy, and we have to allocate our attention, whether we want to or not. That's our task. At the same time, others are attempting to get us to allocate our attention in certain ways. And some people want to monetize our attention when they have it, so that from an attention economy, which is born of the way our brains are made, monetizing attention. Hi. We need volume up. I played a clip earlier and it wasn't loud enough, so thank you so much.
Just try, you want to try right now?
It will be good.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you. So the entertainment industry is the thing, the business of getting money from grabbing and holding our attention. Well, of course, these days, all the action in the entertainment industry is on the digital side. Someone asked me the other day if they should get a Roku or a Boxee to watch Hulu. You've seen lots of names like this and zillions more. It's hard to focus on and remember all those things. When I first tried to sort of do a list and figure out what was what, I really had a hard time keeping track of it. And in my linguistic bewilderment, when this first happened to me, I was reminded of the story of Babel. And out of curiosity, I went back and reread it. It was not what I recalled. I had remembered Babel as the story of a people who were punished because they tried to storm heaven and challenge God. What I found instead was a description of the first entertainment business model in the history of the world. Here are the verses where the people of Babel describe their project. It's not the King James Version, but it's a very literal, legitimate translation of those passages. We can bring ourselves together, the people of Babel, they said, like stone on stone. Use brick for stone. Bake it until hard. For mortar, they heated bitumen. If we bring ourselves together, they said, we can build a city and tower, its top touching the sky, to arrive at fame. Without a name, we're unbound, scattered over the face of the earth. So their project is to achieve fame, to make Babel famous. Babel is the first brand in history. The tower will be visible from far away. Think of it. There is the world, and then there is this tower. What will it do? It will capture the attention of the world. It will advertise the genius of its builders. People will marvel, how did they do it? Well, the answer is what the Greeks called techne. This is it's a little dark. It's a inset from that painting, and you can see the apparatus that they're using, all kinds of fancy pulleys and wenches and fires and pits. They knew how to bake bricks, as that passage said. They knew how to cement bricks with bitumen. They knew how to design a structure that would not collapse of its own weight, how to manage a huge workforce. If we build it, they will come. And if they come, they will spend money. So there's the business model. The company is Babel Inc. Its product is the tower. The tower is marketed to the audience, and the audience's attention is monetized. God, of course, was not pleased. Not because humans wanted to storm the heavens. That's actually not in the story. It's because humans wanted fame, a name. And in God's kingdom, there was room for only one name, one star. And it was God, not Babel. So he destroyed the project, not with an earthquake or a fire, but by destroying their communication system. He baffled their tongue. Hulu, Voodoo, Roku. Here we are. So maybe there's not that much of a difference between this ancient tower with the brand shining on the hill, and this modern brand shining on the hill, visible throughout the world, grabbing and holding and monetizing our scarce attention. But Hollywood's power, as I mentioned, isn't just economic. It is also the ability to do what Plato and Aquinas talked about, to enthrall us. And I'm going to give you an example of it. There's an entire industry based on enthralling us for a particular economic end, and that's the advertising business. So I'm going to show you an ad. You may have seen it on television, and I'm going to stop it at a certain point and then go on.
It was so frustrating, like a mystery I couldn't solve. Night after night, strange sensations in my legs. I had to get up and move when all I wanted to do was rest. I had restless leg syndrome. My doctor said RLS symptoms usually get worse when it's time to relax. And then he said something else. Requip. He said Requip would help relieve those RLS symptoms that were making my nights so difficult.
Okay, so it's an interesting story. Here's this lady. She has this problem we've never heard of. There's something that you can take for it. What's going to happen? So we're now going to see, as I play it, what's going to happen. You're going to see her, and you're going to hear the music continue. That's what we're supposed to be paying attention to. We're fascinated by the story, and we'll be watching her. Will she get to finish the crossword puzzle, or will she get up because her legs are restless? While that's going on, something else is going to happen in this ad. We're not supposed to pay attention to it because we are spending so much time paying attention to this wonderful story. But I invite you to pay attention to not only the story, but also what's being said.
He told me what to watch for, that Requip may cause you to fall asleep or feel very sleepy during normal activities such as driving, or to faint or feel dizzy when you stand up. Tell your doctor if you experience these problems, or if you drink alcohol, or are taking medicines that make you drowsy. Also, tell your doctor if you experience new or increased gambling, sexual, or other intense urges while taking Requip. Side effects may include nausea, drowsiness, vomiting, and dizziness. Thanks to Requip, the RLS mystery is not keeping me up anymore. Ask your doctor about Requip.
I love the gambling part. So, in fact, the Food and Drug Administration, faced with ads like this, felt that they had to issue guidelines for what could and couldn't happen when the side effects were being said in the course of an ad, because brilliant storytellers can figure out a way to make us pay no attention to it. So they felt that they had to set limits so that at least we could be aware of the medical risks. So that's an example of just what Plato and Aquinas were worried about with our bottom-up attention being grabbed. I'm going to go to another arena and give you a couple of examples of what the power of entertainment is. I'm going to go to the realm of the law. Now, some of you may recognize this guy, Perry Mason, and a lot of people who are called for jury duty spent a lot of time watching Perry Mason, one of the great original lawyers. How did every episode of Perry Mason end? With the person on the witness stand under Perry Mason's brutal and brilliant cross-examination saying, "Okay, I did it. It was me. I really did it." That was the format. So now you have people in a jury pool. They're selected for the jury. They're at a trial. But of course, that's fiction. They're watching a real trial. What happens when your brain has been so grabbed and conditioned by one kind of story and you're watching something else which doesn't fit the story? There's a great example. CBS had a legal correspondent named Fred Graham. And he reported on one case when the defense lawyer's client unexpectedly lost. So the lawyer asked a juror what happened. And the juror said, when you cross-examined the prosecutor's key witness, you didn't get him to confess. It's not what the judge said you were supposed to do, but this was too powerful. There's something that people refer to, people in the law, as the CSI effect. For those of you who don't know the various CSI, crime scene investigations, about forensic evidence, and it's amazing forensic evidence. I'll show you a clip from it. Don't you want one? Jurors watching this, you'd be forgiving if they thought that this is how it always is. There was a trial not too long ago. The head of a health corporation named Richard Scrushy. I don't know if you remember that. He was acquitted of securities fraud. And after he was acquitted, the jurors explained that the reason they acquitted was that they should have been shown fingerprints on the actual documents. So that all of the testimony and the first-hand witness accounts, that didn't matter. They wanted that machine to prove that this person was guilty. So this is something that people who are selecting juries think about when they try to figure out whether people will follow the judge's instructions or the instructions of the bottom-up entertainment culture. Another example. There's a show you might have seen. It just finished its last season, called 24. If you don't know it, this clip will Jack Bauer, there's the anti-hero hero. This clip will explain what 24 was about and something in particular about it.
Torture as a tool is used often and effectively in the Fox TV counterterrorism drama 24. That's 24's good guy torturing his own brother. Jack Bauer, the tough, sensitive undercover operative, justifies his actions to save America from Islamic extremists who have just detonated a nuclear bomb in Los Angeles.
The United States military is concerned about it because they've started receiving evidence that soldiers in the field have been impacted by it downrange in Iraq, utilizing techniques which they've seen on 24 and then taking them into an environment in the interrogation booth.
There's something called the Intelligence Service Board, which is an advisory panel to the U.S. intelligence community. And they said in a report, most observers, even those within professional circles, have been influenced by primetime television's view of interrogation. In fact, the U.S. Army Brigadier General Patrick Finnegan and the Dean of West Point and 3 of the most experienced military and FBI interrogators in the country flew to Hollywood to meet with the people who made 24, to voice their concern that the show's central political premise, that the letter of American law must be sacrificed for the country's security, was having a toxic effect on their cadets, promoting unethical and illegal behavior, and had adversely affected the training and performance of real American soldiers. They were getting one thing in the classroom, something else from television, and that was so powerful that it overcame what they were learning. Now, lest you think I only have bad examples, I've got lots of good ones, but I'll just mention one in this same general area. In Afghanistan, one of the challenges is to create an Afghan security force so that in all the towns there are police forces. Well, the problem is that it's thought among Afghans to be a miserable thing to be a police officer. There's no tradition of it being anything else but horrible and dangerous. And so the U.S. invested money to create a television series in Afghanistan called Eagle 4, in which there is a great glamour and public respect for being a member of the Afghan security forces. And in the show, only the best quality recruits are joining the force. That's the method, using prime time, I'm not sure they had that concept, but using television entertainment series as a way to recruit and to get people to think about what it means to be in the security forces different. Well, the stuff that I've been talking about is all a concern of the Norman Lear Center. We look at what entertainment is in the broadest possible way and how it affects society. Just, I'm going to leave a brochure later if you'd like to learn more about it. Just a little bit about it now. We have faculty from all over USC participating in our events. Faculty from 13 different schools and 35 departments of the college have participated in our work. And it's probably gone up since I did that slide. We do our work through a series of projects or programs. Each one has an individual focus. At a given time, there's something like a dozen of those programs. And don't worry, I'm not going to march you through them. We do a lot of things in those programs. We do research, for example. Those are some of our research reports. We, just to pick one, do you know that Great Southern California shakeout, that earthquake drill that happened in the fall? We evaluated it to see whether people learned the messages that they were supposed to learn from that campaign. We publish books. You heard earlier about fashion as something that we're interested in. That book, Ready to Share, comes out of that project. And you can see a range of the different kinds of books. The book in the upper left was about Warner Brothers on the eve of World War II. Warner's wanted to get America to worry about fascism in Europe, but we were neutral. And the Roosevelt administration said, please don't do that. Don't make movies like, which they did anyway, Confessions of a Nazi Spy, because they thought it would force us into the war. And of course, Pearl Harbor did that. That's an interesting study we did and museum exhibit about it. We hold conferences and events of all kinds. There you see Tom Ford. He was the key fashion figure we worked with. Over on the left, George Stephanopoulos, Katie Couric. Up there, if you know music and pretty out there music, that's a guy named Danger Mouse. These are other events and projects we did. Over there, something called the Tyranny of 18 to 49. Why does the 18 to 49 demographic force what movie makers and television makers put on as their product? Why don't they care about other demographics? Don't they have just as much, if not more, discretionary money? And the answer is yes, they do, and they're making a terrible mistake. So stuff like that. We we worked on, there's a park that's being built in downtown Los Angeles, a civic park. We ran a rump unauthorized design competition to get as many people as possible to contribute their ideas for it. With Norman Lear, there was a copy of the Declaration of Independence, which moved all over the country as an effort to get people to register to vote. We don't teach courses, but what the Lear Center, what I did when I started the Lear Center, was to get the Annenberg School to create courses in entertainment. There are now something like 30, 40 different courses. This is just a handful of them. And there's a new minor and a new track. And in fact, the track in entertainment at Annenberg is now the most popular track, and the minor at USC at the college is the most popular minor that Annenberg offers. I'm going to mention just 2 or 3 projects that we're up to give you a sense of what's going on right now, and then we can open up to a conversation. One has to do with news and democracy, another with entertainment and education, and then finally something about research and creativity, and I promise it'll be quick. News and democracy. If you ask people where they get their information about politics, campaigns, public affairs, government issues, where do they find out about it? The #1 answer is local television news. Not newspapers, not cable, not network, not morning shows, not radio, local television news. Well, what is the quality of local television news? That will be a way of answering what is it that people are learning when they say they turn there to learn about those things. Well, television news is part of the entertainment industry. The reason it is started in the 70s when 60 Minutes, CBS suddenly realized that you can make money from news. Used to be that news was just something you put on because you should. It was a lost leader. It was an obligation, an important thing to do. You didn't expect to make money. You spent a lot of money on bureaus and reporters, but, you know, if you got advertising, great, but it wasn't the place you were supposed to be getting it. 60 Minutes, when it started making money, Don Hewitt, the producer, we started a trend and we ruined television because we made it profitable to do this kind of thing. From then onward, all of the news divisions of the networks were put inside the entertainment divisions. And all of the news programming on local television news became the cash cow of those stations. Well, how do you get high ratings for news? You make it something that grabs and holds attention. And what grabs and holds attention? So we did a research project this year. We studied the Los Angeles media market, which includes Los Angeles, but also those 4 other counties. We looked at all 8 stations. These are the stations that you and everyone else in this county gets that broadcast local news. We sampled 14 days from all those stations. We recorded every news broadcast around the clock, almost 1,000 half hours of news. And out of that, we timed almost 20,000 different segments and 11,000 news stories. And then we analyzed them. Said, what's in them? And from that, we were able to assemble what a typical half hour of news is. So I'm going to show you what our results were. And I'm talking about, if you take a half hour of news, if you subtract the ads, which is about 8 1/4 minutes, and then you subtract the teasers and bumpers, you know, stay right with us, we're going to have a talking dog. You subtract all that stuff, you're then left with what's called the news hole. So here is what's in the news hole. the number one piece of the news hole is sports and weather, almost 20%. Second, crime. You will not be shocked to hear that. Why does crime get attention? Fear. It makes you pay attention. You can't not look at it. Next, the soft, odd, miscellaneous stuff. The talking dog kind of stories. You've all seen them. That's how much of that there is. Entertainment. Another 2 minutes. So, what have we not yet gotten to? News. The Los Angeles region, business and economy in a typical show gets 29 seconds. Government in this whole region at all levels, city, county, school boards, neighborhoods, gets 22 seconds. That includes budget, law enforcement, education, layoffs, new ordinances, voting procedures, personnel changes, healthcare, transportation, and immigration. So that is the place that most Americans say they turn to get information about that. And that's how much they're getting. It was an interesting study. We didn't do this one, but it's an interesting correlation. If you ask people where they get their news, but you also give them a current events test, give them 10 questions and pretty straightforward, which is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or who is Vladimir Putin, stuff like that. You score all the tests, and then you just look at the group of the people who did the absolute best on all these tests. And then you ask, okay, where did they get their news? And then you looked at people who didn't do so well. Where did they get their news? So remember, local TV news is where most people said they got their news. So look at the bottom. Local TV news is almost at the bottom for the group that has high knowledge. So the more you watch it, the less you know. Look what's at the top, by the way. Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart. They did the best on these tests. Now, lest I depress you, we also give out an award called the Walter Cronkite Award. He let us use his name starting 12 years ago for excellence in television political broadcasting. We give it out every 2 years. We've just finished our receiving all the entries. We'll be giving them out in April. And I must tell you that all over the country there are people, reporters, news directors, producers, who are working against long odds trying to do a great job. And we are thrilled to be able to shine a spotlight on them in order to encourage more of that. So that's one area, news. Second area, why am I in Berlin talking about what in German the acronym is MINTIF, Mathematics, Informatik, and so on. Those words translate and are used in English generally as STEM, which means it's a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The German government wants to encourage more women and girls to go into those fields. And they're trying every way they can. And they decided last year that maybe one way to do it is to use entertainment to inspire girls and women. So you see some examples of TV shows with scientists and engineers and mathematicians who are girls and women. And so they wanted to figure out how to encourage their television and film industry to show more girls and women in science. And they asked me to come to talk about our project called Hollywood Health and Society. This is a project that's now 10 years old, and it is based on the power of entertainment. when people see TV shows, it has a profound effect on them. So profound that in Hollywood, there are more than 100 groups whose sole purpose is to advocate going to these shows and saying, please cover our issue in your shows. I'm not talking about news or documentaries. I'm talking about regular entertainment series. You probably will not be surprised. I mean, here, out of that 100, here's just a small sample involving the depiction, for example, of people of different racial background, sexual orientation, issues like violence or the environment. All of these have advocates going to shows. Well, we are involved in the public health arena, and we do it on behalf of the federal government. The Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, some other federal agencies, as well as a couple of private foundations, have realized that one of the most effective ways to communicate health messages, public health messages, is through entertainment. So, for example, we work with shows, we connect shows, writers, and producers with the best experts in the country on any field so that they can ask questions and get it right as opposed to making it up. And for example, you can see the reach of these shows. We work with Law and Order on measles and vaccination. 10.5 million people watch that show. You can see the other ones. These things have big impacts on their audience. We know that because we measure the impact on audience. So I'm going to show you some examples of that. These are shows where we consulted with them to help them on the facts and understand what the most important public health messages are. And at the same time, we measured the impact on audiences when these shows aired. So here's a very brief excerpt from Law and Order SVU.
Any big kids in the orchestra? Like over 200 pounds?
Used to be heavy kids played music just so they wouldn't have to do PE. But we don't have PE anymore, and about a third of our kids are overweight.
What are you doing about it?
Now, make the cafeteria serve more salads and fruits. Kids like burgers and fries. Got half a dozen fast food restaurants right on this block. Vending machines are locked during school hours, but kids stock up before.
And it's not just about food, right? I mean, these kids, they can exercise, play sports.
Where you been, detective? We can't afford sports facilities or the teachers to run them. They're lucky to have an orchestra.
How much do you weigh, Rudy?
320 pounds.
Have you always been that heavy?
Guess so. Most of my family's big.
What is your favorite food that you remember when you were a kid?
Snippy Snowy Flakes. The one with the lion called Snippy on the box.
Why was Snippy so special?
My favorite character on TV. And the cereal came with little toys inside.
Did your family eat breakfast together?
Mom said to work, so she would just sit us in front of the TV till school time.
What about when you came home from school? Did your mom cook dinner?
Are we going to hear about every meal Mr. Brixton ever ate?
There's Waldron.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to show the jury how impossible it is for a child to learn how to eat responsibly.
Your Honor.
Especially when the teacher is not a parent but a TV set whose sole purpose is to sell him as many sweet and fatty foods
Your
as
Honor,
possible.
she is testifying.
Jury will ignore counsel's last remarks. You may answer the question.
Mom didn't cook. She was always tired from working 2 jobs. We go out for burgers or fried chicken, order in pizza, eat in front of the TV.
Well, I'm here to warn you that this trial is about more.
We studied the impact of this show, which was about, in part, obesity and its medical risks. And we learned, and you can see it on that chart, that in every one of those areas there was an increase of knowledge. We tested people before and after the show. Did they know, for example, that obesity could cause blindness, high blood pressure, and so on? Those check boxes were increases from before and after. Especially interesting that middle box, African Americans, every single one showing something that's well known in this field, which is that people identify with the main character. So if you can see yourself, the impact of that message is especially strong. We asked audiences, how likely are you to diet in the next month, before and after you've seen the show? And you can see that among African Americans in particular, there was a spike in intention. Lots more results like that. I'm just giving you a kind of headlines of it. Grey's Anatomy, different storyline, different topic. A short excerpt.
Congratulations, you're pregnant. You're sure? It's a big day for pregnant ladies. Pregnant ladies never return. That's weird. So I'm only supposed to give you a couple of these, but this is like a month's supply of prenatal vitamin samples. They're free. We need to schedule an abortion. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to intrude, but you might want to sit with this for a few days before you make your decision. So, there's no decision to make. I'm HIV positive. I knew it. You disapprove. You're here to push some kind of agenda, right? No. No. Listen, if you want to have an abortion because you want to have an abortion, then that's between you and whatever God you believe. But if you want to have an abortion because you think that's what medicine is telling you to do, then that's between you and me. I was ineffectual. It was unclear. I've been on my heels a little bit lately, and I was unclear, so just listen, okay? I wasn't telling you there is some chance your baby might not be born sick. I was telling you there is a 98% chance your baby could be born perfectly healthy. A 98% chance. There's a higher chance of your baby being born with Down syndrome than there is of you passing HIV on to your child. I can't. I know you gave up on having children a long time ago, and I understand that it's difficult to readjust your thinking so quickly, but Sarah, if you take your meds responsibly, there's no reason why you can't have a beautiful, happy baby. This is your chance, if you want it. This is your chance to be a mom. A 98% chance. 98% chance.
You heard how many times that was said? So we did a pre and post test. Asked people, the question you see on top, as far as you know, if a woman who is HIV positive becomes pregnant and receives proper treatment, what is the chance she will give birth to a healthy baby who is not infected with HIV? Before they saw the show, only 15% of the people said there's more than a 90% chance to have a healthy baby. 1 week after seeing the show, 61% said that. And even 6 weeks later, it had only dropped to 45%, demonstrating, again, the incredible impact of entertainment to teach public health messages. This is perhaps my favorite. I don't know if you know the show Numbers. You don't need to know what it's about. This episode is about a supposed black market in organ transplants.
And you were all here to sell your kidney?
A man came to our village, promised us each $1,000.
There's an area outside of Chennai. It's called Kidney Village.
So you're saying there's regular traffic in human organs?
There are over 80,000 people on the transplant list in this country, and every day 17 of them die. Waiting.
Let's go! Move on the table! Turn around, put your hands behind your back. Rita?
Jimmy, we're out!
What were you doing at the DMV? Well, I'm now officially an organ donor. Check it out.
Hey, look at that. Hey, well, cool. Nice, huh? All right, so now I get you a little more respect around here?
You know, if more people took that simple step, can you imagine the ramifications?
On basic economic theory, black markets rely on a shortage of a regulated commodity.
That's right. Increase the supply, the black market disappears.
There's a couple extra applications in case someone wants. No, that's all right. I already got my sticker.
Yeah, look, I've been an organ donor for years.
Yeah, me too.
So we were involved in that last scene, the end of the show, in which the regular cast all said they had become organ donors through the DMV. We did a test before and after the show asking people, would they become do they plan to be an organ donor or not? And after seeing the show, 10% of non-donors said they had decided to become a donor. So that was the second example. I'll end with this one. It's a project that we've worked on, and it's quite recent. It had a big event in December. The premise is that what if you thought of the university, the academy, as a creative industry? You know, there's the music industry, there's the television industry. What if you think of the university as creative? Its product is knowledge. What are the analogies between them? Well, for example, both of them have, you might call, an ecology of creativity. People do their work in creative, collaborative spaces where they riff off of one another. Academics, people in the entertainment industry, in the creative industries, for example, in fashion and music and movie industries, work in settings which are not all that different, if you think about it, to the way people work in laboratories and classrooms and studios. These are environments of creativity. Marketing is something that the university has in common with creative industries. Music labels and film studios have to develop campaigns. Well, so do universities, to project their brands into the world. Everyone needs an audience. In the case of the academy, the audience is, for example, a professional association. In the case of the entertainment industry, it is people watching Avatar or things like that. But there is someone at the other end. And product is at the end of the line. If you are in the entertainment industry, your products could be best-selling books, CDs, fashion designs, magazines, TV shows. And if you're in the academy, they can be research, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, things to be taught to students and to benefit society. So what we did was to have this exercise of imagining the university as a creative industry. And we did it on behalf of the vice president of USC for research. This is on here, but not up there. I'm going to tell you about it. We went all over USC. We met with people on the health sciences campus. We worked went to engineering. We went to social sciences. We went to the cinema school. We got faculty together, and we asked them, what does it take to be creative? What do you need? What are the barriers to being creative? And the one theme that was universal throughout them is we need to collaborate with each other. That there is no problem which society is facing that can be solved from inside one single discipline. You need teams. You need creative groups. You need to network using technology. And this was a theme no matter what the field was. In the end, we had met with about 55 faculty. We got their views, we distilled them, and then we held a day-long conference in December in which we got a couple hundred of the absolute top faculty from across USC to together ask the question, what are the best practices in collaboration? Any examples that happen in your life or that you know of anywhere? What are the barriers to achieving those examples at USC, and how do we overcome those barriers? So, Chris, This was something else I had, which when I opened is not showing up there. This is not part of that. So this is that. I just opened a new file. Does it need to?
Yeah, because it's a different thing.
Oh, system preference, the mirror?
Yeah, it's the mirror.
Okay.
It's going to fall.
Great.
Funny on your computer, but.
Okay, then we can go back to that. And open it up.
This one?
That one? Yes! Well, it's a little too large. I'm going to adjust the size just a little bit. Well, you'll see some of it. At this event, this is what we showed everybody to begin. Those are the groups that we met with. We summarized what happened in all those groups. Those are the faculty that we met with. Those are the questions that we asked them. I described these a moment ago. And here were their answers. Here were the best practices they knew about. Innovative funding programs. Interdisciplinary visiting scholar programs they knew about. Universities that have embraced collaborative research. What are some of the barriers? Conflicting priorities, physical distance, tenure guidelines. That was the number one thing people mentioned. What are some of the solutions? Social spaces, coffee pots where people can run into people who are not from their department. Whiteboards in the hallways. So if you run into somebody and you have a good idea, you don't have to go somewhere to write something down, that it all be there. And lots of other examples. I'm just rushing through this to finish. Bar chart or list here. What should USC do? This is the young woman in my office who made this particular demonstration. So it was a very exciting conference, and not least because, I'm just going to turn this off. Because in the room were all the people from USC who have the power to deal with all these things. We had the senior vice president of USC for faculty appointment, promotion, and tenure. We had the chairman of the tenure committee. We had the head of the USC research committee. Everybody in a position of authority to do something about this was placed in the same space as all these faculty who said, we've got a problem to solve, what can we do about it? So we launched a process. We don't know where it's going to go, but it's very exciting because USC wants to be known as a place in the country and ultimately globally that knows how to collaborate, that uses the latest technology and to break down barriers between disciplines. It's not easy to collaborate. You really have to work at it. It's not a natural thing, especially in universities. And so USC is determined to do it, and we are honored that we were asked by the Vice President of Research to create this process and now to move it forward. So those were 3 examples. That's some of the stuff the Lear Center is up to. We'll be leaving you some materials about it, and I think we can move on to questions. Thank you very much. There is a mic. There it is. Great.
So does Does anybody have any questions right now?
You spoke earlier on about the dangers of entertainment in terms of sum-zero game. What do you have to say to the many, many researchers who come to elderly people to suggest that certain forms of entertainment make for brain health?
Make for brain health. We had, as part of the conference that I just mentioned, the head of the National Institute on Aging from the National Institutes of Health. He is the top person in the federal research establishment, and Alzheimer's is his specialty. The reason we had him was that he did this amazing thing. Scientists normally don't like to share their data. They like to do their work, and everyone publishes and gets credit for it. He gave a lot of money and put together a consortium under the condition that every piece of data be public and that anybody could write any journal article about it that they wanted. So he has created the largest database about Alzheimer's that exists. So people are mining it to look at clinical trials of drugs, for example, and things like crossword puzzles and other kind of stimulation. And I am sorry to tell you that he says there is no evidence that what you do will advance or retard Alzheimer's. It's great to be engaged, to have fun, to be entertained. That's about your life and the choices you make, but it won't have an effect, at least as far as science now knows, on the progress of what seems to be largely a genetic disease with some environmental factors. So I wish I could look forward to learning 7 more languages and staving off whatever may or may not be in there. But he didn't find any evidence.
I think it's great, the work that you were showing us that you do for the entertainment industry, but just like the internet and trying to understand what's true and what isn't true, how would the general public know the difference between 24 and Grey's Anatomy in terms of the information that they're hearing being accurate or inaccurate?
They don't. That's the problem. And so what we try to do is to sensitize the creators of these shows to the amazing power and authority they have and to ask them to wield it responsibly. So sometimes they say, leave me alone, and sometimes they say, great, but we have to do this story and it takes 24 hours, and you're telling us this disease incubates over 6 months. What are we going to do about it? So there's something of a gap between storytelling and, in this case, public health. What we do is our best to make it as easy as it can be to do it accurately. They can choose to or not to, and audiences have no idea what is behind any of these shows. So our job is, given that reality, to try to do as much as we can behind the scenes to get them to understand that they can be accurate and not sacrifice entertainment value. Sure. We've been doing this now for almost 10 years, and it has been, more than anything else, the building of relationships. We are not a single-issue project, so we don't, there are lots of wonderful organizations whose concern is, buckle up, or obesity, or epilepsy. We deal with every issue the CDC deals with, which is virtually 100, 200 different issues in public health and safety. So we're not one cause, we're everything. We also say to these shows, we are a resource. We're not going to come to you and tell you what to do. We want you to know that we have this free information. So don't hesitate. And we don't claim to know. What we do is we connect them with the best people around the country who can answer their questions. And after a certain point, they come to trust us. And once you have that trust, you're able to bring in additional themes and ideas. So that, for example, a show that's been relying on you for dozens of different episodes, you could call and say, you know, the most amazing expert in domestic violence is coming into town. She has incredible stories. Would you like your writers to spend an hour hearing about her stories? Chances are they'll say yes, and so they'll sit around with the writer, and then what happens is up to them. So it's very low-key. We also put on panel discussions at the Writers Guild, and they're quite popular. Writers come because, in essence, what we're doing is saying, free stories, come steal this information. We also put out quarterly, we just did one today, a newsletter which takes stories that are in the news and points out the public health ideas, because what writers often do is they're grabbing stuff out of the newspaper, and so we direct their attention to some really juicy stuff and then help them if they're interested in finding out the stuff. So it's very delicate. The entertainment industry is in the business of making money. They're not in the public health business. They're not in any other pro-social business. And they don't want anybody telling them what to do. There's First Amendment and artistic freedom. So we try to keep a distance, earn trust, be available as a resource, and then as this relationship grows, broaden the range of stuff that we work on with them.
Any other questions?
Yes?
Beginning, you were talking about the dangers of over-information. You know, I just kind of think about just in the last 5 years. You know, now everyone has an iPhone, an iPad, at least one mobile device, maybe two, a laptop, a desktop. Just in the last 5 years, I feel like I've probably doubled the amount of information that I take in, not just entertainment-wise, but through work, every part of society. So don't you just see this getting worse and worse, or more of an issue as opposed to getting better?
It's certainly the case that the quantity of information being generated is, you know, going up like a hockey stick, and shows no sign of retreating. I mean, there's some amazing statistic, like in the last 5 years, 90% of the information generated in the history of the world has been generated. I mean, it's that kind of thing, and that'll only get to be more so. So that stuff is out there, and we have more platforms than ever, and mobile is certainly only the latest with all the things you can carry around. We still have only this same bandwidth. We can't deal with a certain amount. So it creates certain kinds of pathologies. People are so anxious. Information anxiety is a name that some people, data smog is another term used. People are so anxious about all this stuff that they do what we all know they do. We do. We are looking at our mobile devices all the time. There's a piece in the paper today about how pedestrians are now in danger because they're looking down as they're crossing the street. We're taking our laptops into bed with us and on vacation. So this pressure is only increasing. You're absolutely right. And a lot of it is not information, it's entertainment, whether you want it to be entertainment or not. There's a game called Angry Birds. Has anyone played Angry Birds? This is just, you know, it's kind of addictive and fun, and it's casual. You can do it while you're waiting in the line. That grabs you and holds you. And while you're doing that, you're not, you know, getting your email and your calls. It's only getting worse. And the question then becomes, how do we manage it? How do we deal with it? And more people are trying to figure out how to get off the grid, as they say, to confine the amount of time they will do email, or just put a message saying, I will only be available at a certain time today. So there are different coping strategies. It is a huge problem, and all of us are dealing with it. Absolutely.
One of your earlier slides showed that the Colbert and Stewart programs were a big source of news. Is there a problem with that, given that I consider those comedy shows?
It's not only that they're a source of news, but that the people who watch them know more about current events than people who watch local news or network news. So this is an empirical finding that if you watch those shows more than you watch local news, you will actually know more information, the kind of information you can score on a quiz, than people who don't. So even though it's comedy, information is coming through. And I think one of the reasons, if you watch these shows, is, a typical TV news segment lasts, 45 seconds, a minute 15. Their segments last 7 minutes, 9 minutes. They show lots of tape. They explain stuff so that if you don't know something, you can't get the joke. So they make sure you see the stuff. So even though their purpose is comedy, satire, irony, whatever, they are at the same time giving you that information. So young people in particular say that shows like that are where they're turning first. So even though across the whole population, local news, among younger people, it's Colbert and Stewart that they're turning first for news. And as it turns out, in the scheme of things, it's not such a terrible choice. Better that than nothing at all. I have a chart that I didn't bring tonight, which looks at both of those questions. And in fact, those trends are generally true for every age group and through time. So we are getting dumber, and all of us are getting dumber. So. Right.
Have you done a similar analysis of, say, the cable news programs, Fox, MSNBC, CNN?
Others have. We have focused on local news because of its status as number one. It's also, local news is the hardest thing to study because we study it nationally. We've studied about 144 stations and 55 media markets. The only way you can do that is to actually be in that market with a video recorder. You can't get news from somewhere else. And so that's a very complicated process to collect all that data and move it around. We started doing it with video cassettes in Federal Express. Now at least there's digits you can move around on the internet. But we have the largest repository of local news in the country. Others, Vanderbilt University in Nashville, specializes in those network broadcasts, and so they have for many years tracked both the flagship shows of all the different broadcast and cable networks.
Given the small amount of news in the local news, do you find, has Vanderbilt, say, determined that there's more news in, say, from the news channels?
There's more on broadcast than there is on cable because cable is cheap, and so they rely on opinion. It's just really easy to have people in and fight with each other. It costs money to have reporters and bureaus and go out in the field. So the three networks, even though they've cut way back, ABC, CBS, and NBC, still spend money on that, and they do stories. So if you look at a typical half hour, which is actually about 22 minutes of news, you will find much more stuff that would be called government politics and public affairs than you would on cable, where the amount is tiny And it usually is cyclical, because as soon as some blonde girl is kidnapped somewhere, then everything goes off and it becomes that 24 hours. So it's, talk about entertainment, fear, sex, and novelty. That's what they're doing. Don't change the channel is what they're all about.
Regulatory agency, you're talking about, the drug people have to be careful how they do stuff. When you look at those incredible movies that capture people with some of those factors, they're full of mistruths, but there's nobody to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not quite right.
That's right. That is true for all genres of entertainment, except stuff in which you're advertising public health products. You can make a feature film, which is fiction, only it's about real people, and you can say stuff which is true or not true, and no one will stop you. It's all about whether you can raise the money and find a distributor. I mean, a classic example was the Oliver Stone movie about JFK, in which it basically said that Lyndon Johnson was the head of a conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy. And it just sort of laid it out there. It was based on some book, which is somebody's theory, and there it is. And for a lot of people, one imagines, who saw that movie, they don't know any different. And so that's very powerful storytelling. But no one, except the pushback from the public, from critics, from that sort of thing, does anything to change that. And that's also true in this mongrel form of docudrama, and it's also true in documentaries. It's all about social practice. With the First Amendment, as long as you're not violating child pornography and libeling somebody, and even that there's an issue of whether you're a public figure or not, you can do and say whatever you want, and it's up to the marketplace of ideas and audiences and consumers to intervene. Yes, sir.
Is there any kind of a tutorial or handbook on how to be effective in getting the message across in the entertainment field?
Yes, there are many, some are focused on news, so that if you are, for example, a nonprofit group and you have a message that you want to get out through news channels, there are handbooks for that. There is a field known globally as entertainment education, which is all about how to mount essentially public information campaigns using entertainment. And these are far better known outside the U.S. than in the U.S. because outside the U.S. there are in most nations something called a Ministry of Culture or Ministry of Information, and the television stations, at least some of them in most other nations, are run by the government. And so governments can decide to have public health campaigns. And I mean, for example, in Latin America, for years there was a series of soap operas that were used to teach people why you shouldn't be ashamed to learn to read when you're an adult. And so they did a whole 13-episode thing about it. It looked like a soap opera, but it was done very carefully, almost mathematically. You know, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, in what episode should the person who wants to learn be ashamed, and who should triumph over them. So yes, there are I mean, sometimes it's a little quite formulaic. We've had come visit us the people who have invented these formulas, and that conference in Berlin actually was a gathering globally of the people who do that.
So can you use any of the data that you showed us here to know how to become more effective?
Yes. If what you're up to is getting messages out through entertainment, yes, there are things that you can do. It's almost like a cookbook of how plots should be built and what kind of characters and how you have to reinforce things. It really does turn into a science, and it is used especially globally. HIV campaigns in Africa are built on these kinds of things. They do a lot of radio soap operas or puppet plays in villages, all following these formulas.
And what's the incentive for the producers to work hard on this to make it happen?
In those other countries, they are part of a plan. There are partnerships between government funding agencies, government-supported media entities, and government television stations. And so they all get together at the beginning and say, okay, there's going to be $10 million for this series, and here are our goals, and it's going to be entertaining, and we're going to measure to see if we get the message out. So they're all in on it. The only place where that's not the case is the U.S., where it's entertainment is completely separate from government. And so the ways in which shows decide to do or not do something is up to them. I'll give you an example of a plan. Viacom, big entertainment company run by Sumner Redstone, about 7-8 years ago, Sumner Redstone decided that he wanted to do something about HIV/AIDS. And so he asked every single property that he owned, Paramount Studios, MTV, lots and lots of television producers. He wanted every single show, every single movie to have something with a message about preventing HIV/AIDS. And he's the boss, and they did. So it wasn't the government doing it, it was their boss. So it can happen from top down within a corporate structure, but it's very different from in other countries where it's social policy that they're going after.
But our government's done that in other countries where we've done Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Iraq, for instance, right after we invaded. We went in to get the message out to people.
That is using news. You might call it propaganda, but it's not using entertainment to do it. These are using serial stories, actual soap operas, or character-driven plots. Our Voice of America and so on, all of that are news broadcasts, framed as news broadcasts, not soap operas and serials and dramas. The closest we've come is in the Middle East when there's an experiment, it's gone on for a few years now, called Al-Hura, in which the mix of what's on the American-funded news station has changed. So instead of it being all news, it's a mixture of pop music and news. So they draw audiences in, young people, they hope, because they want to listen to the pop music and then stay for the news that's in between. So they've adjusted the carburetor of that. But what they haven't done is try to embed messages inside the music. That would be using entertainment.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to conclude our presentation for the night. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask Professor Kaplan afterwards. I want to thank you all so much for coming tonight. Please remember that our next series is February 23rd here with the Health Care panel. And thank you so much, Professor Kaplan.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Oh, here are my, here you go.
Hand them out at the door.
Or you just leave them if people want them,